Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Get on your podcast apps and rate this show. Give it a 5-star rating and review, please. It helps me climb up in the charts so more people see it and word gets out, and we can help lead others to solutions, to comfort, or just to share something weird. All right. Just blessed to be here. I'm very thankful for you guys. It's humbling. It's humbling to get some of these emails and to be able to have the opportunity to pray for some of you. And you guys pray for me. I love that, and I appreciate it. I made some really good friends through this show. I won't get sappy. Let's just have a good time and bring Garrett on the show.
So, well, glad to be back on again. But a few things I forgot the last time. Give me a minute here and collect my thoughts on where I want to start. Probably start with one of the smaller ones that I left out. So I lived in northwestern Colorado, as I mentioned, and we actually lived in development just outside of town. So you'd have to get on US 40 to get into town. And so I'm heading in one day. I don't remember what I was doing, so I was probably in that, 17 to 20 range, back in the early 2000s. And I just started getting more into dogs and really fascinated with the Irish Wolfhounds, if you've ever seen one of those.
Oh, yeah.
So as I'm driving in, well after dark, over on the left-hand side of the road as I'm heading east, there was something that looked rather like an Irish Wolfhound, except the shoulders were about somewhere in the 5 to 6 foot range.
Oh my goodness.
So, it's completely dark, wasn't moving, just standing there on the side of the road, facing into the westbound lane, looking back over his shoulder at me. Something I've noticed across a couple of these stories is how often all of this stuff links back to stuff I'd seen previously or experienced before. Period of time where I see, starting to find out about Irish Wolfhounds. Well, then I see something that looks rather like it because they're rather distinctive with very long legs and a very curly, gnarly coat.
Right.
So, and at that height, wolf dogs can get rather large. Well, this was way too large for that. Had a lot of just different, greyhounds still not large enough, don't have the curly coat, and it was all black, more like a shadow than it was, except it's blocking out all the light, almost like it was absorbing all of it. So,
wow.
Yeah. What it was, be interesting to know if anybody else has seen something in the same vein. You hear enough stories, but when you start, maybe somebody saw it in the same time period, same rough area, it'd be interesting. But a lot of these things, unfortunately, I'm not going to get to know in this lifetime.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, but, so it was 5 foot at the shoulder on all fours.
Yeah.
And is it in the median, you said, or is it on the side of the road?
Well, it's just a 2-lane, U.S. highway. It's not divided or anything, and it was off on that shoulder. And which if it had been anything physical, it would have made sense because it's one of those you come up over the hill with a higher hill up above it, so there
Right.
ends up being a lot of roadkill right there. So, but you know, like I said, the only I'd been willing to write it off. Maybe my mind blew the proportions out of whack if it hadn't been sitting within 60 feet of a lamp post, you know, but no reflection, no shine of a coat, no color.
Hmm.
Like I said, almost like it was absorbing all the light.
Wow.
And there was no movement that I saw. Whether or not I looked in the rear view mirror to see if it was still behind me, I don't recall. So,
Right.
but
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah, that's very interesting. Did
yeah.
you, did it give you any kind of feeling at the time?
No, it was one of those. It's that type of road. You're watching for deer,
Dear.
antelope, that time of year, and
Oh yeah.
so it's one of those file that way and keep scanning just in case you miss something coming across the road. So, but well, it had me on to another one. For a very short and depressing period of time, I lived in Sidney, Nebraska, and we lived well outside of town. I was working for Cabela's, which probably why I will not step foot in the Cabela's anymore because we were at the home distribution center there in Sydney where it all started. It was because it was an old army ammo dump from pre-World War One. It was one of those. I think it was 7 miles you could walk warehouse to warehouse without ever doubling back or going outside because they had these uh, just hallways connecting all of these different warehouses, and it was in surplus army housing. It's I think the stove in it was heated by a stove, was dated 1918 or 1908, somewhere in that time frame.
Oh,
If you've ever been there, it gets cold in the winter because there ain't a whole lot to break up the wind.
right.
So, but anyway, so I was driving back in because, like I said, it was a couple miles outside of Sydney. As you're heading west, to the distribution center with this surplus army housing, and coming up just a winding road through near a little ravine, coming up a hill, and came across, whether you want to call it a shadow person, it didn't really present like the hat and the red eyes and loose clothes, but looked more like the silhouette of you know something you'd see in the Grapes of Wrath.
Hmm.
That turn of the century clothing, and but it was a long, tall, very lean silhouette, 8 feet tall. Which talked to my dad about it a little bit later on that night, and he well, did it look like Bigfoot? No, but can you expand on what you know about that one?
Yeah, really.
But it was just one of those fleeting one-off scenarios that has happened a couple times. So
Yeah.
and but
Well, let me ask you on that. Does it fit the description of what people are calling the flannel man? Have you heard that one?
no, I haven't.
It's a very, I guess it's a silhouette, but it's got a little bit of enough of a coloration that you can make out that it's wearing a flannel shirt.
No, this one it wasn't as solid as the dog, but it was definitely casting some kind of shadow, which maybe I've got this one turned around in my head because the shadow was coming towards me, except it was after dark, which wouldn't make a single bit of sense because there's not a street light out there or anything.
Hmm.
But I can remember it didn't seem completely solid, but it was enough of a distinct shape to see. For whatever reason, just the silhouette, reminds you of something you'd see from like the Depression era or the coal mines down around your area way back in the day with like, baggy coveralls and a, tattered hat type of, like more
Yeah.
like a ball cap, but, you know, he didn't look like the person was doing very well, just as thin as the silhouette was. And, it's all kind of vague impressions at that point, but, that's kind of the way my mind put it together. So,
Yeah. Wow.
but it was big enough. It wouldn't have been a shadow cast by anything because there's nothing taller than knee high grass out there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and it
but
couldn't have been a shadow if there's nothing for it to have a backdrop. If you're just out, you know what I mean? If
yeah,
you're out there, that's got to be some kind of figure.
yeah. And again, you're running into the weird height proportions and everything else.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
but do you want me to recap that demonic attachment I spoke about in the last episode, or?
Yeah, that way if people haven't heard that episode, they can then get a quick overview.
Okay. Well, this started back when I was living in Craig, Colorado. We were down in the floodplain of the river one night, just being stupid, thinking we know anything about the supernatural world, and I was the only one of the three of us that saw this. But I turned around because they're both facing back towards town, which they would have been facing north at that point, and I just you feel the eyes on you. So you turn around, you do that slow scanning, start looking for anything that looks out of the ordinary, any hard lines, anything like that, and see this thing that's actually relatively short. I don't know, 4.5, 5 feet. At the moment, my memories kind of fade in and out with that, so I apologize. I'm a little less precise, but I can still remember. It had a very stocky barrel chest, very spindly, thin limbs,
Mm-hmm.
not overly long. It had a upside down triangle for a head, relatively flat front and back, and kind of rounded around the edges. With you know the alien gray kind of reverse teardrop eyes pointing
Yes.
in towards the center of the face. Very big, again, completely black. The skin was, almost like if you saw a bug. It has just a little bit of shine to it,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, overall of its body, it looked almost like tree roots. Which, okay, what's going on with that? But
Yeah.
it was one of those things. In a very bad way, it seemed to only have eyes for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing would kind of pop up from time to time. I'd get a very specific headache, that always let me know either that it was that or that it was nearby and coming. And eventually, years after my salvation, when I was living in San Antonio, almost like God said, "Hey, pay attention. I'm going to show you where this thing is at." And you know, I had this view in my mind's eye of part of the city about 2 miles away, mile or two away, and nothing was really told to me. It's just I could see it almost like it was running into a wall and react in pain. Basically, I took as God saying this is as close as it will ever get to you again.
Amen.
Because at that point I was starting to get very, very serious about my faith for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and but but actually stepping back a couple of years, was living with my second wife on uh, east side of Cleveland. Yeah, fabulous neighborhood. But we happened to be right on that line of 2 blocks one direction. We couldn't even get to the grocery store because our credit wasn't good enough. And then 2 blocks the other direction, you heard gunshots every night in the summer.
Yeah.
Just weird little area. we we had rented this place. We had the downstairs of a 3-story plus a basement carpenter that she used to nanny for the couple upstairs. And it wasn't horrible, but I wasn't thrilled with the place, especially when the landlord and the guy upstairs would go down in the basement to smoke their pot, and they'd kind of be coming up, through the floorboards because it was well maintained, but it was still a you know turn of the century house or something like that. It had
Right.
some wear and tear on it, and it was one of those. I've never been afraid of the dark. Actually, for a lot of my life, I actually prefer to be out and moving around in the dark. Whatever reason, and but the back stairs down to the basement where we had a couple of washers and dryers, it was all I could do to keep myself from taking those stairs at a dead run both directions. It was just a very uncharacteristic sense of dread, and in fact, a lot of times I couldn't even stop myself. I was sprinting those stairs. So, and there was a lot of times you'd be down in the base. It's a Cleveland basement. It's always going to be dark and dingy and creepy. But you could just feel the eyes on you, and you'd never see anything. But we, plus I wasn't ecstatic with the upstairs neighbors because they were just neo hippies. Worried about their carbon footprint and constantly composting, even though they really didn't know how to work a garden. I'm a dog person. It doesn't matter how mean the dog is. I'm going to like the dog.
Yeah.
And this family was terrified of dogs, which is my first sign of get away. I don't want to know you. Just you go up to their apartment, they'd have pictures of North Vietnamese army camps and North Vietnamese POW camps, and books on Lenin and Mao, Marx and Engels, and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I went up there once, wouldn't do it again. But so we started having just more and more odd feelings, and because like I said, we were on the ground floor. You know, it was, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't very nice. And, uh, uh, my my oldest boy, Wyatt, he'd actually been born 3.5 months premature, and we actually ended up with Irish twins with Ethan because they were, you know, Wyatt was born November 18th of 2009, and Ethan was born November mm, November 10th of 2010. So it was kind of hectic time,
Yeah.
especially since Wyatt had been born 3.5 months premature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw him, he looked like something out of the Matrix because his skin hadn't fused. I mean, I couldn't even touch him because if I'd laid my hand on his arm, the skin would have peeled off on mine. His eyes were fused. I mean, breathing tube, feeding tube, different pick lines, IVs, monitors, you know. But that first spark of getting serious about my faith was in this time period because I'm looking at this little boy, and there's that part of my brain that is fighting it because I can't go to pieces because I know she's going to lose it, and there's no way this kid's going to make it.
Right.
The Lord bless this because this kid was so incredibly strong. The third time they had to re-intubate him, they just kind of went, well, let's leave it out and see how he does. And he started to thrive. So when he pulled out his feeding tube, they didn't bother putting it back in. Let him go. He got stronger. And he just kept on. And to this, to the last time I saw him, he was just the sweetest little boy.
Yeah.
Because his brother Ethan is so much like me, it's scary. That kid could be up in his room playing for 3 days, and the rest of the world could disappear, and he wouldn't know it till the food ran out. But Wyatt would have to come down every hour just because he wanted a hug.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and never. I didn't even have to hardly look at that kid because he was so sensitive. He would just stop what he was doing and figured out he'd done something wrong. But
That's
yeah. But anyway, stepping back because he was still in that 13 hours of sleep a day phase, taking long naps. And
mm-hmm.
the first real big things, we've been out grocery shopping, we get home, get him in the crib, make sure he's settled down, and uh, I'd actually started bringing groceries. She'd gone to lay him down. And so I came back in to check on him. And I, for whatever reason, there was a spoon sitting out towards the edge of the not cabinets. Why am I drawing blank? Counter. Sorry. And I had set a couple of cans of soup back by the backsplash. And one of the bags I had just kind of pulled it and pulled all the air out of it and laid it down in the line in front of that spoon. So I'm back there and uh, I hear a can fall on the floor. The heck is that? So, it was one of those you kind of had a little maze to get out of the back bedroom to the kitchen and get in there. And well, there's that one of those cans of soup that I put on the back of the counter on the floor, except would have had to come up over the spoon and the shopping bag, those plastic shopping bags, which,
Right.
you know, any bit of air is going to move that. You know, uh, there's probably 3 or 4 times that, we would hear a baby crying. It wouldn't
Mm.
be on the monitor, and it wasn't his cry, but, you hear a baby cry, you got an infant. I'm dashing back there to make sure he's okay, just because he'd only been home for a couple of months. So, you're still worried,
Yeah.
but it wasn't him. Like I said, didn't even come across the monitor. All the kids upstairs were at least 6, so it wouldn't have been a baby crying. Plus, you can tell where the sound's coming from. And it was coming from that back bedroom, so, and at this point, um, my old dog, which she'll come back a little bit later in this, she was what's called a German hunting terrier. What it was pre-World War II, was a Nazi geneticist, had designed these dogs to be the ultimate terrier's terrier and exceptionally hardy. I mean, they're the size of a Jack Russell, but if that dog jumped off the bed in the middle of the night, it literally sounded like you dropped a cinder block on the floor because they have so much muscle. I mean, Lord help you, if you're walking through the house in the middle of the night and accidentally kick the dog, you like to break your foot, just because they are that dense of muscle. And the best way to describe these dogs is take the teeth, the temperament, and the coloration of a Rottweiler and jam that down into a Jack Russell.
Oh, wow.
I mean, their coat is so dense and curly, most animals can't bite through it. The teeth, our old vet, back when we used to breed these dogs, that was his favorite thing. He'd get these dogs up on the exam table, peel back their teeth every time, wall to wall tooth, because I mean their teeth were oversized.
Yeah.
We my dog was the closest one out of 8 of them to dying of natural causes because they are so tough and so tenacious and so used to winning. They'll pick a fight with anything and they usually win. But she was very much a guardian, and our other dog was Tahoe, which we got him on the day we got married. And since we couldn't afford a honeymoon, we figured we'd name the dog after a honeymoon destination.
There you go.
But yeah, he was a German Shepherd Lab mix, and used to say he was Shepherd pretty, but Lab stupid. It wasn't that he was stupid, but he was so happy and good natured and easygoing. You can't think of anything being that happy and being smart, but he was. But we noticed the dogs, especially Maddie, the German hunting terrier, she would stare at different points on the wall or the ceiling and growl, which, she was an exceptionally quiet dog. She'd been trained to be. So if she's growling, there's something there. And this happened more and more often. You'd see Tahoe, he'd get real skittish. Between the baby crying, the can of soup coming off the counter, the feelings of just the promise of horrible things on that back staircase. It's like, okay, well, we're going to get in touch with, paranormal investigators, because I was new to being a serious Christian. She was, came out of Arkansas, Baptist as Baptist could be, where supernatural isn't, will generally be denied that stuff ever happened.
Right.
And so we ended up getting in touch, which I'm not even sure they're still going, but it was a guy I'd actually seen on Discoveries of Haunting, David Considine. And, we're going through the interview process, going through my history. Says, there's something happening in that house, but we're not sure of which end it's coming from. Says, what do you mean? Well, it certainly seems like something's happening. And, one of the members of the team, she was, depending on who she was talking to, she was either a psychic or she had a gift of discernment that God would show her things. How much of that was tied to the Catholic Church, how much of that was trying to explain it to most people who don't know, don't understand, and or how much of it was they're playing both ends.
Right.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't try and speculate, but says, well, it also sounds like you got a demonic attachment. Huh? You ever been involved in the occult? Well, yeah. Okay, now this is making more sense. So they said, whatever's going on with the house itself, we can't do anything about, but you're going to have to handle this through your faith.
Right.
And so, that took a lot of tripping and stumbling over myself through the years. And at that point, I was working third shift. I was doing, night security / valet for, a downtown Cleveland hotel. And so, I usually would leave for work about 9 o'clock. And it always seemed to hit that fever pitch right about the time I was leaving for work. Because there was about a dozen nights that, we had the dog kennels in the kitchen, or I'm sorry, in the dining room, which butted up against the master bedroom. And I was really sure that my dog was going to destroy her kennel trying to get out and get at whatever this thing is. And
Oh, wow.
I was fairly certain Tahoe was going to bust out the other end and dig through the wall to get in the bedroom with my ex-wife to get away from it. But so one night we're going through this again. And for whatever reason, I keep trying to get the dogs calmed down, knowing it's not going to work. So, but I had stepped back to the little hallway, and we just had the one bathroom. But out of the lower corner of the door and floor, this gray mist comes through, and it really, beyond how it showed itself, it really threw me off because it looked like a sheet of paper just folding in and over itself, and almost like some kind of art house type of animation of folding paper. And what the reason it threw me off so bad was I actually flashed back to a dream I'd forgotten about, probably like 7 to 9 year old range. It was a nightmare. And, back in the house I grew up in, well, let me clarify. I was about 7 or 9 when I had the dream, and that I woke up, and up at the ceiling, near the overhead light, there was this yellow sheet of light that was folding over itself like that. It was one of those, even in the dream, I was petrified. By the time I could finally break away and dash out of the room, leading into other parts of a nightmare that, don't necessarily make sense. My dad's trying to smother the burning carcass of a donkey in their closet, so,
Wow.
I'm not sure how much of the rest of that dream actually applies to anything, but, it was that folding sheet, because even that moment you're astonished, you flash back to that dream and you just stop and watch it for a minute, and it was probably going for maybe 45 seconds. It just right down there towards the floor, in the doorway, just folding on itself continuously over and over, and new parts of it would kind of roll out of the back and then be folded in. And, it was just a gray mist, which is the only thing I've ever seen like that. You know, and didn't have as sharp and defined an edges as it did in my dream.
Right.
It was that same type of movement. And keep in mind that dream happened well before any hint of the occult was in my life. In fact, that was right in the heart at the time that we were members of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And, so, but it does lead into what up until recently, in fact, as recently as when I got with you again, wanting to go, oh, yeah, I forgot a bunch of stuff. I, I'd had hundreds of dreams of the future, but they were the most useless dreams of the future ever because there was never anybody in it. There was never sound. There was never context. It was just these random snapshots,
Hmm.
literal still images of things I would see, and they're for, mid teens to mid 20s. It would happen, 10, 20 times a year. I'd see the snapshot and go, why? Why was I shown this? What's the purpose?
Right.
And I mean, there are literally hundreds of these incidents. And the most useful one I'd ever had, and this is where I'm really going to date myself, was didn't have sound, but I had a moving image because it was back in the early 2000s, and an ex-girlfriend was breaking up with me via chat room.
Yeah.
So, that was the closest to anything useful up until very recently, within the last 2 or 3 years. And I'd only had one or two up until the last probably 6 months that you served any purpose, because I would still occasionally get that random snapshot of, oh yeah, I dreamed this. Okay, I don't get it. Whatever, move on. But the cool thing is over the last 2 years, when I've had several times, I know exactly the conversation I'm having. I recognize the person I'm having the conversation with, and it's allowed me to change the conversation to keep from getting myself in trouble or starting a stupid argument.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's really great. In fact, probably the most vivid one, before I moved Rochelle out here, we were on the phone. I don't remember what we were talking to, but it was heading towards an argument. And it was enough that I knew every word I was going to say, what every word she was going to say after that. It was just like, no, it doesn't matter. This is a stupid argument. There's no point in it. Just let it go and back out of the conversation. Hmm. So and the frustrating part is when you have the dream, it's sealed up. You don't know what the time frame is. You don't know when and where, and you completely forget about it till you're in that moment.
So it's kind of
So
like deja vu.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, up until probably the last two and a half years, and it's only really increased in the last 6 months. It was always some random snapshot of inanimate objects with no context and no apparent purpose.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this too. Did these snapshots, did they only come to you while you were sleeping, or did it happen to you like throughout the day, like almost like a vision, like a prophetic view? Or
Dreams only.
wow, it's interesting.
Yeah. So, but to tie this back into the dog, Maddie, I've heard reports of this. That every time I've read a report of this, it's within 6 months before or after the animal dies. Except this was about 2 years before she had to be put down because she was going blind and she was already. German hunting terriers are not for people who don't know what they're doing with the dog. I mean, you have to be very serious. In fact, nowadays, breeders will not sell to you unless you are an established hunter, and use hunting dogs daily because, you know, this dog, this is how ferocious these dogs can be. Maddie was uh, from my from my mother's dog's first litter, and these are just the type of dogs they're going to have fights a couple times a year. Because of their coat, the dog's not getting hurt, even though they're just tearing it up and ripping out chunks of fur and everything else. And my dad made the cardinal sin. He reached in to grab one of the dogs, and just in the flash of an eye, he had to have 8 stitches across his knuckles
Mm,
by sheer accidents because the dogs never bit down. Because as fast as they were going and as worked up as they were, they knew my dad and were not going to mess with my dad. In fact, it took us about 3 hours to find the dogs inside the house.
right.
But anyways, so with her going blind, she eventually had to be put down. But 2 years prior, I had probably 4 or 5 times that this happened between two different houses that I would see Maddie walk into the room. You always catch it out of the corner of your eye and you look in it and then you realize, wait, that ain't Maddie because that's completely black, no shine,
Mm,
you know, but you see the perfect outline of a shadow drawing in all the light. And there was even twice the dog was literally laying up against my hip, and I saw the dog trot into the room, because she had a very distinctive trot, and it was the exact same. And it was before we were at this haunted house, with the demonic manifestations.
right.
So like I said, probably 4 or 5 times that happened, you know,
Mm,
within 6 months. And that was 2 years before we had to put her down because I was going into colleges. So, we weren't going to be in a place where we could really have a dog, period, let alone that difficult of a breed. By then she was about 16 years old and going blind. So it's like, okay, I hate to do it, but, something bad's going to happen if we don't fix the situation. But, that one threw me off. Cause like I said, every time I've heard accounts of that, It's always 6 months before or 6 months after the dog dies.
What do you think that was then?
I I really don't have an answer because it's one of those that you realize that's not the dog, even though you're looking at it, center your focus. It's not like you're just catching this out of the corner of your eye. It's very physically there. You start looking around for where the dog is, and by the time you look back, it's gone.
Mm. Okay, so
You
you're
know,
able to actually
and
like lock in on this dog.
yeah, and it was the same size proportions. Like I said, she was no bigger than your average Jack Russell.
All right.
So, could that have been the only thing I could really come up with was at the start of the demonic manifestations. Does it do a slow build to acclimate you to its presence type of thing?
Right. Come in
Just that
kind of, yeah.
every, unless it was piggybacking, because every time this particular entity, I knew it was there. Even if I hadn't seen it, hadn't felt anything else, I'd have that same headache every time. So I guess that kind of shoots that out, unless it, was something else piggybacking on it.
Well, that's
So
interesting. That's weird that because it would be, I don't know. I don't see how it could be the spirit of that particular dog, or or
yeah,
her energy or anything like that. But she's still super vital. Years before she would pass. Um,
yeah,
it seems like you're obviously a dog lover. Something was trying to
hmm,
come to you in an innocent kind of way. Like you said, it might have been the start of that demonic manifestation. For some people,
yeah,
a ghost child will appear and they're like, oh, she's harmless. Or it'll be grandma lives in the attic. Or it'll, for you, maybe it was this sweet little puppy.
yeah, and because that's the more I think about it, because everybody I know, aside from my mom, has a ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Part of that probably is, because my father was always adamant that whether it was ghosts or UFOs or aliens, it's all some kind of demonic manifestation. Which now even my dad's gone back on that because he had it happen twice. My grandmother, his mom, I'm not the type of person to say somebody's an angel. Well, she was an angel.
All right.
I mean, she was. If I tell you her name is Roberta Lee, do you need me to describe where she's from? Because she was from the coal mining country. I forget whether it was West Virginia or Kentucky.
Yeah.
Just hardworking. I mean, she'd be up before Grandpa to get my Uncle Jerry going for work and pack his lunch, make his breakfast, sit there and have coffee with him.
Yeah.
She'd clean the kitchen, Grandpa up for second shift as an electrician, get his breakfast and lunch. And, she'd still be going cleaning the house, make his dinner when he came home at 11 o'clock and be the last one to bed and the first one up in the morning. And there's only one time I can remember her not having a smile on her face, and she had to be every bit that loving, wonderful of a person to counteract Grandpa. So, and she, because my dad has had her visit him in a dream twice. The first one was a few weeks after she died in 97, and then one was a couple years later when he was at a very, very much a low point. And that's the hard part for me because just anecdotally, demons know so much about us.
Hmm.
They can mimic people, but then we also serve a God that can do anything
That's right.
and can give us some type of manifestation when needed. That muddies the waters for me, you know, because especially my dad has always been very analytical, and he always breaks down Bible as anything to do with religion or supernatural, very nuts and bolts like. Even if it's something he may not completely understand, he's going to look at it from analytical end. And for him to, granted that's his mom, a very loving Christian mother. So yeah, there's going to be that emotional reaction, but my dad's not one that gets carried away by emotion. So, that does muddy the waters for me personally a bit.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's the closest I have to a ghost story is that dog.
Wow.
Although sparks me to thinking because both of my parents have Ouija board stories because
There
dad
it
was at a
is.
yeah. Well, dad was at a party, so it was probably about 72 because he was fresh out of the Marine Corps, and he didn't want to mess with it at all. But he was studying with Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, and somebody broke out the Ouija board. Hey, Gary, you want to ask it a question? And my dad, being the interrogator and kind of smart aleck that he is, yeah, what's God's name? J-E-H, and then the planchette explodes.
Yeah. Wow.
And then mom, when she was a real, like preteen, Girl Scouts type thing, again, somebody else, she had no interest in it really, but they talked her into putting her hands on the planchette. She was the only person that could get an answer out of that board.
Hmm.
If she took her hands off it, it stopped moving, wouldn't move for nothing. She touched it, that thing goes straight into overdrive. So, but then again, my mom is the most, I want nothing to do with aliens or the supernatural. You know, she's just literally takes a hard line of I want nothing to do with it whatsoever in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So,
Right. So,
you know,
so where are you at with this? Like with this, I don't want to call it a shadow dog because it had a form and a color and everything on the side of the road. And then you have
yeah.
this dog entity entering your home, inside your home. Um, the smoke, the 8 foot tall shadow person. What do you think all this is?
At a certain point, I think, with like the shadow person, and the dog on the side of the road. It comes to me as this is the way I rationalize it in my brain. Not saying I'm an expert, not saying there's any reason you should believe me over anybody else. It's just random spiritual occurrences, most likely inspired by the devil, just because that's who I am, the way I look at things,
Right.
that you just happen across. Because northwestern Colorado and western Nebraska, there ain't a whole lot of people. The
Yeah.
veil gets thin. You will see random weird stuff that you can't put your finger on,
Yeah.
and it's not so much a knee jerk reaction at this point in my life that everything's demonic, but a lot of things are, because it so easily pulls people down this rabbit trail and out of the Bible rather that, because the way I look at this stuff, okay, this is the phenomena. What's the Bible say?
Right.
You know, and it's one of those. Is everything demonic? No, when it's very noticeable. I'm not a big believer in the stone tape theory, but there's very likely at least something to it that, certain events are going to imprint in a certain way. You know, I see nothing in the Bible that says our spirits can linger. But then again, you run into Saul and the Witch of Endor. That freaked her out because, who was the prophet in that? I apologize.
I know.
Um, that's Samuel,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I wanted to say
He
Solomon.
showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. He showed up and that freaked her out. She was used to her spirit guides.
Right.
She didn't know what to do when the prophet of God showed up.
Right.
So, so it is possible and it does happen, at least as I understand the Bible in this point in time, because let's face it, the Christian walk is a series of revelations. It never stops. There's so many layers that, to say I've got it all figured out, I'd have to be an idiot to say I've got it all figured out.
That's right. That's all of us, man. It's
Yeah.
it's something new every time I open the Bible.
Yeah. So apologize. I just got to get my phone on a charger here.
Oh, you're good.
But anyways, and that's the hard part too, is not rushing to judgment. It's be still and listen, because God's going to speak to us about everything if we are attentive enough and let him.
Yes.
A lot of times, at least for me personally, yeah, something happened. Quit worrying about it. Do what you're supposed to be doing. So,
That's it.
and so, and that's the thing. I'm hoping somebody's gonna, that people will start talking and be able to give me some feedback. But then again, I also know I'm very real about who I am. Probably, other than a few people paying some general attention, that's not likely to happen. We'll see what God's got in store and go from there. So, but and but yeah, we actually at the end of the last episode we got talking. You asked what I thought aliens were.
Mm-hmm.
And do I believe it's demonic? Yes, but I wanted to kind of clarify it a little bit. I guess the best way, if anybody's familiar with Timothy Alberino, Josh Peck,
Yep.
Those are two probably the most formative ones for how I view this stuff. Just because it's demonic doesn't mean it's not physical. Whether it's, you have the alien grays, there's a lot of evidence to say it's lights and clockwork, no soul. So that would make them a fit extension for something to interact in the 3D universe.
Right.
But then you have these others that are, the Nordics or the insect, praying mantis ones, and others that come across. I've heard descriptions of them. They're just straight demonic with wings and horns and everything else.
Yeah.
And one of the best things that really helped me to kind of wrap my head around all this from Josh Peck is, well, who says angels and demons don't have technology? Which is where it really broke it apart to where I could start diving into the multi-dimensional theory, of when it talks of the first, second, and third heaven, and even hell being the zero dimension. Then we have the three dimensions we live in. You have the second heaven being higher planes, that incorporate more uh, axes and more ways to measure dimension that we can't even conceive of. And then that's still clearly separate from the third heaven being the direct, unfiltered presence of God.
Right.
To me, that would be the completion of the entirety of, whether it's 4, 11, 12, or 370,000 dimensions.
Yeah.
And that's the best understanding. I look at it as it's ultra, apologize. I had the term in my head and I've lost it. But that basically, yeah, angels have a physical body that exists in a higher dimension. So they have access to abilities we don't, being confined to our four dimensions.
Mm.
And since the the devils would be angels that kept not their first estate, there's still some kind of physicality to that in my mind.
Right.
It and it makes sense then why you would have demons separate from devils, or powers, principalities, the cosmic crusaders. All of that is because they are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which is why they want to be in a body so bad. And when they get into a body, they sink to the levels of depravity. And then the body starts to die because of the lack of the natural spirit. So could UFOs crash? Well, if angels are flying around in some kind of craft, battling it out with fallen angels in some kind of craft, yeah, something's going to hit the ground.
Yep.
You know, Ultra terrestrial. That's kind of the way I wanted to put it. I apologize.
Yeah, I knew where you were going.
And
I
that,
was going to throw that out there. That the John was it John Keel used to use that term a lot too. The ultra terrestrials. Yeah.
yeah, and that gets you into Agartha, Hollow Earth, the Tool Society in Nazi Germany and things like that. Because they are so, so many of the Nazi brass were so adamant that their more advanced designs they actually got from channeling sessions with the Vril maidens from the Vril or the Tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that it makes it all make sense. Not that that's the highest form of proof, but it's at least something we need to be made aware of. And then people will, how do you know God didn't make aliens on another planet? Well, I don't, but I think if they were going to show up, it would have been important enough for God to let us know about.
Right.
And then you get into Daniel and Revelation, and you have these just completely crazy depictions of otherworldly creatures. Well, we also know that in Enoch, the book of Enoch, it wasn't just that they were blending their, with humanity, they were sinning against the plants and the animals as well. So who knows what they decided to make,
Right.
And then you have, if you have you ever researched much with CERN?
Yes, I have.
They're very replete with talking about opening up portals into other dimensions and seeing these entities,
Yes, and
and then you got
communicating with
that,
them.
yeah, you know, and in a way that helps to muddy the waters, I think, because you're always going to have that group of people that's going to, oh, they were messing with you, or, they're going to try and explain it away, and we're stepping into realms that science can't really quantify, not in a way that the human mind could understand. That, it's going to muddy the waters, and we reach a level of knowledge where I just don't know anymore. Nobody can wrap their head around it. So most people just give up trying to understand it.
Right.
And you're talking about, everything to do with the end times deception. Well, what would cause most people to question their faith and the veracity of the Bible? And it's not even so much that they would question their faith, but they would start expanding into, whether it's Gnostics, Theosophy, a million other derivations of everything to say, well, okay, the Bible's not the final authority. Well, the Bible doesn't have all the answers. It gives us what we need to know. Maybe we ought to pay more attention to it, because people are going to choose to worship the image of the beast.
Yes, they will.
So it's one of those, even with Bigfoot, is Bigfoot a spiritual being or a physical being? Yes.
Yes.
You know, how much do we really understand about this stuff? Not as much as we would like to think we do. So
Yeah.
at a
That
certain point, you
that's it,
know,
man.
yeah, you can study it, but you're not going to understand the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those. I keep an open mind, but I'm wary of everything. Because there are so many people I believed in so wholeheartedly, and you find out this horrific thing that they did, but then you have to add back in, you know, one of my favorite sayings about myself, if God could use Balaam's dumb ass to speak, he can use this dumb ass to speak. And, because even Balaam rendered prophecy from the Lord
Right.
against his own will, essentially.
Yeah.
So God can use people who are not saved and horrible people to do miraculous things.
Absolutely, he can. And you were nailing so many things that basically sum up the journey of this whole show. I started off 3.5 years ago thinking I knew what Bigfoot was, thinking I knew what aliens were. You know, I I sit here and I collected stories. I've got. I think this episode maybe is like number 200. So I got a lot of people I've spoken to, and as everything starts coming together and all the research that I've done, because you have to keep up, and you have to expand. You got to open your mind, and the reality of my faith and everything just starts pulling together, and it brings you to a point, you know, and that's why this last year or year and a half of the show, I've been so much more outspoken and just forthright about what I've been led to discuss, to talk about, to uncover. We're supposed to expose the darkness, right? And that's just where it's at. And I've gotten some hate mail, but I've gotten a lot more love than hate. So yeah, I think I think you're speaking my love language here, man. you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's even the thing I've noticed, because I can remember there for a while, I almost completely stopped listening because it was one of the fireside chats with you and your dad, and you were talking about, something to do with reincarnation.
Yeah.
And, it was one of those, is like, ooh, and then they're thrown into Catholic element. How much do I want to keep listening? But, it was one of those, you know what, keep going. Because, there's a lot of stuff I listen to that I vehemently disagree with.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
But, there is value in sharpening your understanding, and it's going to cause you, if you're doing it right, to refer back to God and the Bible.
Yeah.
Because there's both the word, but then there's the Holy Spirit inspiration to understand the word. Because I've read the same passage 12 times and come to understand it on 5 or 6 different levels. And I know I'm going to find a different level eventually too.
Right.
Because the Bible in and of itself, at least to the way I view the world, is multidimensional, because there are layers of meanings, and different applications that go so deep and, will tie back into themselves, that if you think the Bible contradicts itself, you're not really reading for effect there.
Right. Yeah.
So,
You just read it again.
yeah.
Just read it again. That's an example of what Ephesians 3 refers to as the manifold wisdom of God. There's
Yeah,
so many angles.
yeah,
He is his ways are so much higher. When he
oh
blesses
yeah,
us with those revelations, we just need to cling to him and keep seeking. He'll give us the wisdom, but we got to look for it.
yep, oh yeah. And that's the thing is that even with the stuff you've done with Vicky Joy Anderson, even the episode with Susie I heard today, it's like you know, it's keep going, brother. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. And it causes me, hey, you were starting to enter into an area of judgment where you were outside your lane. You better start looking at yourself a whole lot closer than you're looking at everybody else.
That's
So, and that's what it comes down to. Because yeah, there are people I've known. Okay, it's I don't it doesn't profit me to know this person and be in any kind of communion with them. But then there are other people that really, God, this person, but then you start to understand the way they express themselves and the level that is going on inside their head, and you start to go, wow, I need to know this person because they just massively shifted how I view everything.
right.
So it's and that's the hard part is the Bible says we're gazing into a mirror darkly,
Yep.
and there's going to be things you miss the first 10,000 times you see it. And then suddenly you catch that one little sideways aspect that just throws everything straight into focus. So it's one of those, at this point, I'm more careful, but I listen to a whole lot broader range of things than I ever used to. Because, there have been stories. Yeah, I would have listened to it for entertainment a year ago. Now I'm discerning, I'm going to God, I'm
Yep.
analyzing, you know, unfortunately, right now I'm in that period of I'm hearing way too much Mike Heiser of, yeah, that sounds great, and it is weird, but reel it back in because it ain't that weird. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The
yeah.
world's missing Mike Heiser right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's between him and Russ Dizdar. You can either be upset that they're gone or be grateful to God that such men lived. And now I need to start moving that direction too. I need to get more involved.
Amen.
You, and so, but yeah. So, yeah, you got any questions?
I don't think I do. I think we've pretty much dug through all of it. One question. I can look and see through this 8 foot tall thin silhouette. Oh nope, I answered it myself. He was in coveralls. That's weird. That's just a
Yeah.
weird one, man.
Well, and that's the thing. How did I understand that level of detail from a transparent shadow?
Right.
I mean, not completely transparent. It was fairly thick,
Yeah.
but where does that level of detail come from? Which starts your brain to twitching of the examination of, okay, am I adding detail that I didn't really notice at the time, or was I detail that I didn't think hard enough on to catch on until I started speaking about it, or was this some mental aspect of the phenomena that you don't catch at first, but eventually expands. I'd love to give you an answer. I just don't have
Right. Well, Garrett, it's always a blessing to talk to you, brother. I
it. It
know
is.
it takes us forever to lock down a good day and time, but it's worth it, man. I thank you for being patient with me.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah. if you want to edit this part out, but I had the thought today, don't know exactly why. Maybe one of these days at a conference, we can get a few of us that have been on and sit down with you and have a round table of our experiences and kind of compare notes. Might be something interesting, might be a waste of time, but it's a thought.
Well, I think that's a great thought. If we can't do it in a conference, maybe we can do it in a Zoom call or something one of these days.
Well,
Um,
you get the notion for it, you let me know.
but if you're going to be in or around Northern Ohio, October 6th, 7th, and 8th, I'll be up there for a conference.
Where are you going to be? Where are you going to be at?
Ada, Ohio, at Ohio Northern University. I think it's what it's called. Um,
I'd have to look that up because I'm in Cleveland, so yeah,
I'm
I'm
not
right
far
there
from
on
Cleveland.
Lake Erie. So,
Let me look. I don't
yeah,
typically get on my phone, but let's see. Um, well, I get on my phone all the time, but not during the show. It's 2 hours,
yeah,
maybe 2.5 hours from
okay,
Cleveland to Ada. But yeah, man, there's going to be 6 podcasters out there, 6 shows. To Kill
yeah,
Mockingbirds, Uncomfortable, Appalachian Intelligence, Hollow Sky, Cryptids of the Corn, and me. We'll be out there for a full weekend, and
yeah,
it's going to be like a real small, low key setting. It's going to be pretty good. Good conversations will be had.
yeah. Well, might be able to just because I know usually the first week or two of hockey season I'm light on games. That's my second job as I referee hockey, so
Okay.
we'll have to see.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Well, if I can break away from hunting season, you can break away from hunting.
with what I make in a hockey season, that massively supplements my income for the entire year.
I
So we'll
guarantee it, bro.
see.
I guarantee it. All right.
All right.
You have a good evening, man. And God bless. Thank you again.
You too, sir. Keep it going. Keep letting the Lord lead you.
Will do. Thanks, brother.